This is Sherry Rose, and I am welcoming you today to our presentation. And whether this is your first WBECS or your fourth year, I'd like to welcome you to the 4th Annual Business and Executive Coach Summit. WBECS has a very simple mission, and that is to have a profound impact on your success as a business or executive coach. And we do this by introducing you to the world's leading experts and thought leaders. And those are the people who are at the cutting edge, and they introduce new methodologies, new frameworks, and new coaching tools, as well as bringing you the latest insight and tactics for marketing and growing your business. Each year we ask coaches to nominate those who've had a profound impact on their success. And this year we have 53 speakers from a wide and diverse range of coaching subject areas. And today we have 2 co-presenters. And we have a long-term strategic goal of making coaches more successful. So what you'll learn in these areas you can actually implement in your business. And we ask you to take the time to turn off your distractions. And our 2 speakers today, Ian Day and John Blakey, I will introduce them in just a moment. But first, I want you to know that after the session, you can continue to make comments by publicly acknowledging this session and materials on our Facebook page, which is at wbecs.com/Facebook. And secondly, for more private conversations that are kept in our private LinkedIn community, please use our LinkedIn group, wbecs.com/LinkedIn. And if you see that, that's in the chat area over on the GoToWebinar. So let's move on. As I said, I have 2 very special presenters today. Ian Day. Ian is a highly experienced coach and leadership facilitator working with leaders from international organizations to create sustained individual and business change. Ian's the co-author of the acclaimed book that we can actually see a copy of on our slide, which is Challenging Coaching, Going Beyond Traditional Coaching to Face the Facts, and regularly speaks at coaching and business conferences. And John Blakey is one of the UK's leading executive coaches and board advisors, having worked with CEOs and MDs in Europe, Asia, Australia, and the US in recent years. He coaches and leads organizations such as British Airways, the BBC, Kellogg, and a range of other companies. And in his corporate career, he served as the International Managing Director at Logica PLC and later its Director of Coaching, and the very first such role at the FTSE 100 organization. So John and Ian, thank you so much for being here today. We're happy to have you.
Thanks, Sherry. This is Ian Day speaking, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today and to talk to you about challenging coaching, going beyond traditional coaching to face the facts, which is the book that John and I published in 2012, and to take you through the concepts that we have in challenging coaching. And it certainly had a great impact on the coaching that John and I have been working on the last few years, so hopefully it will benefit you in terms of your coaching as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. This is John Blakey. Wherever you're sat in the world, whatever time of day it is, we're delighted to be sharing this topic with you. Our aim in the next 20 minutes is to challenge you to challenge more in your coaching. We want to challenge you to come to the edge of your coaching skills, and this is a taster, a 20-minute taster for our 90-minute session, which will be on June 13th. But delighted to be here, and Ian and I, privileged to be sharing this topic with you today. We'd like to start by explaining why we're here. Many of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek, the author of the great book Start With Why. And Simon's simple but powerful message is that a lot of us concentrate on communicating what we do and how we do it, but few of us focus on why we do what we do. And he says that if you talk about why you do what you do, you'll attract people that believe what you believe, rather than attracting people who want what you have. And so we wanted to start today with talking to you about what we believe and hopefully attracting other people who believe the same thing. And on the slide that you can see in front of you now is one of our beliefs. It's a belief that we were inspired to adopt because of listening to the coaching gurus, to John Whitmore. And one of John's phrases is, coaching is bigger than coaching. And it's at first glance a puzzling phrase, but one that Ian and I have adopted as very much one of our core beliefs, because we do believe that coaching is more than a skill, that it's more than a profession, and that it's actually a movement and a tribe of individuals globally that have appeared at a certain time in the evolution of leadership in order to act as catalysts around shifting the paradigm of leadership in the 21st century environment. So everything that Ian and I have done over the past 10 years as we work together has been motivated by really adopting this belief that coaching is bigger than coaching, and that's what inspired us to go on our journey with the topic that we're going to share with you today.
So just to tell you a little bit about our journey, I remember in 2002 I was studying for a coaching qualification. And it was while I was studying that I felt frustrated with the person-centered, non-directing coaching approach that I was being taught. I didn't feel authentic, and it was as if I was holding back and not being the best I could be, not serving the coachees the best that I could. So there was a feeling that I had more to offer, but it was as if the rules and regulations of traditional coaching were holding me back. And I sort of became aware that there were a number of coach development programs that were developing vanilla coaches. It was as if it was just these bland coaches that were playing by the rules rather than passionate, authentic coaches that made a significant difference to individuals and organizations. So that's where I felt at that time in 2002 that there was something missing. And John, later on, you had some developments along your journey towards this challenging coaching.
Yeah, in 2008, if we fast forward to 2008, I vividly remember reading an edition of Coaching at Work, a magazine that many of you may subscribe to, and there was an interview with Peter Hawkins in that edition. Peter, fellow WBECS presenter, and Peter made a throwaway comment in that interview where he said, what were all the coaches doing when the banks were failing? This was at the time of the global financial crisis. And that comment hit me between the eyes, and it reinforced again this feeling that Ian had in 2002 that, hang on a minute, that there's something missing here. We're missing a piece. There's something about the principles and competences that we're focusing on that is not adopting a broad enough perspective to make us able to act as catalysts around this leadership shift that we referred to earlier. And that's why our first book was called Where Were All the Coaches When the Banks Went Down? It was really our question to the coaching profession to say, something big has happened here, something systemically has failed, and we, like everybody else, need to shine the spotlight on ourselves and our profession and work out what are we going to learn from this, what are we going to do to take our coaching skills forward, and in particular, how do we act as agents of challenge in the organizational system.
And then later on in 2010, I challenged John Blakey to ask Sir John Whitmore, the author of Coaching for Performance, who was a friend of John's, to introduce us to Nicholas Brealey, Sir John Whitmore's publisher. And that was quite a challenge. It was something that we hadn't really thought was a possibility. But 2 weeks later, we met with Nick Brealey in his office, and we were talking about challenging coaching becoming a bigger, more available book that told a more rounded story. And it was almost a feeling that this was the spirit of the time. Organizations and individuals had been through a very difficult economic period, and it was now time to challenge more and look at a different way that coaching could really impact and change organizations and individuals. And then in 2012, as I mentioned earlier, Challenging Coaching was published. And as we developed the concept of challenging coaching, the central part of that, the central message was around support and challenge, and the crucial thing to balance both support and challenge. And when we talk about support, we mean activities by the coach that affirm the value of the individual, such as developing trust, respect, rapport, activities by the coach that reduce uncertainty and anxiety within the coachee. And then we talk about challenge. Well, these are activities by the coach that compel the individual to confront the reality. So this is about holding accountability, providing challenging feedback, constructive feedback, and also questioning limiting beliefs. But also the challenge to meet the expectations of stakeholders, such as goal setting, visioning, and aligning values. And you can see from this chart that there is this ideal balance of support and challenge. And this is some research that was conducted by Nevitt Sanford and then refined by Deloz. And it showed that optimum performance is where there is this balance of support and challenge. And you could say that traditional non-directed person-centered coaching was typically a highly supportive activity. So strong in terms of building rapport, empathy, trust, acknowledging and accepting the individual. That was great for building highly effective coaching relationships. But when working within organizations and with coachees who are robust senior individuals, it appeared that coaching needs to be more than just support. So there is this balance of support and challenge. And when we get that balance, we're able to create that sustained change for the individual and organizations. And you can see the facts diagram here is on the top left. So everything that we're going to talk about is how to adopt a more challenging approach in terms of the coaching model and the coaching approach that we undertake and you might find beneficial.
Another way of looking at this is that Ian and I felt that in the early years of our coach training and coach accreditation that we'd been invited to worship at the temple of traditional coaching, and that it had been a very evangelical temple of principles that had three important and sacred pillars. So we felt that the temple of traditional coaching was held up by the sacred pillars of non-directive coaching, holding to the individual's agenda, and building rapport. And it was as if these were pillars that could not be questioned, that could not be challenged, and that we felt that the profession was in danger of worshipping these pillars and becoming slaves to these pillars rather than being authentic to our personal presence in the moment with our clients. And I think this came home to me one particular time in a coaching session. It was probably the third coaching session with my clients, and I was having a fantastic conversation. They appeared to be getting a huge amount out of it. We were talking about a fascinating subject, but this little voice at the back of my head started to whisper to me, you know, this is all very well, but how on earth did you get to this point, and what has this got to do with the people who are actually paying for this coaching assignment? In other words, how does this link to the systemic agenda that you're part of and that your client is part of? And it was that little nagging voice, which I'm sure a number of us will have had, that reminded me that there are risks associated with this temple of traditional coaching, that if all we do all the time as coaches is pursue the non-directive approach, hold to the individual's agenda, and build rapport, there are three risks that we invite into our coaching. And those risks are collusion, self-obsession, and irrelevance. So we may find that we're colluding with a very self-centered individual view of the world and ignoring other perspectives of reality. We may find that we're on an interesting path, but one that is not relevant to the contracted goals of the coaching, again, for all the stakeholders. And we may find that we're fueling a me attitude to coaching rather than a we attitude to coaching.
So in challenging coaching, we developed Sanford and Delaw's model of support and challenge into this 2x2 matrix. So you can see here on the horizontal axis we have challenge from low to high, and on the vertical we have supports from low to high. And if you were a coach and you offered low challenge and low support, and that was the only intervention, the only type of intervention that you made, it could be described that it's a box of apathy and inertia. It's almost like going through the motions, turning up but not really doing anything. Not a great place to be for any particular coach. And then as we go up, so we're offering high support but still low challenge, then you might say we're in a quadrant that you could describe as the cozy club. So this is where it's this great rapport-building conversation, highly supportive to the individual but not necessarily challenging them to move on. So it's a very comfortable conversation. But if individuals are to move towards achieving goals, then there needs to be a challenge. But if there's too much challenge, as you can see with high challenge but low support, then there's a quadrant that we might describe as stress. So individuals become overwhelmed because the challenge is just so great. They lose resourcefulness, they're not able to think clearly, they're not able to talk effectively, and also over a long term that can lead to illness. But there, in the 2x2 matrix, we have the top right box, which is this balance of high challenge and high support. And this is what we describe as the high performance area, and the loving boots. And what we mean by that is if we have the intention to help the individual achieve their goal, the goal that they've stated within the organizational context, if we have that as a central intention, then sometimes we might need to nudge them out of a comfort zone. We might need to give them a gentle kick in the right direction. But this is the loving boot with the intention to help them, but it can be seen as a little bit provocative. Now, you could say that the cozy club is an area of care, and you could say that the stress box is an area of confrontation. And combining those two phrases together, you could say that the high support, high challenge box is an area of carefrontation, offering the two things at the same time, so where there's high support and high challenge.
So let's bring that model to life with an example of high support, high challenge coaching, and of carefrontation. Part of the journey that Ian and I have been on with coaching in the last 10 years is that we've worked extensively with Olympic athletes and their coaches. And the slide that you're looking at now shows a picture of a coach that we worked with for a number of years called Bill Barry with his coachee, the single-scull Team GB rower Alan Campbell. And we want to just share an example with you of the first time that Bill met Alan, which was back in 2002. And Bill was invited down to the river at the Thames in London, to the local club, to watch Alan rowing. And Alan was a novice sculler. He was very early in his career. He was overweight. He was uncoordinated. He was very raw. And yet at the end of his practice session, he jumped out of his boat and marched up to Bill, who was a silver medalist, Olympic silver medalist, very experienced coach. And Alan confronted Bill very confidently. And Bill said to him, "So Alan, what is your goal?" And Alan came back quick as a flash and said, "I want to win an Olympic medal." Now at that point, I thought that Bill might ridicule his goal. He might have walked away. He might have dismissed it. But he said he looked into Alan's eyes and he saw a steely determination. And he said to Alan, "Well, if you want to win an Olympic medal, I'll be your coach, and you need to lose 10 pounds in weight by the end of next month." And in that moment, I witnessed a great example of high support, high challenge coaching. On the one hand, the affirmation of the goal, the belief in the individual, the willingness to go on that journey with him. But on the other hand, the reality check, the carefrontation, the accountability and the feedback that was necessary for them both to feel that they were committed to this very courageous goal.
So let's look about how we can do this when we're working with another individual, when we're coaching somebody. And what we've got here is a model called the ZOOD, the Zone of Uncomfortable Debate. And this is a model that was developed by Professor Cliff Bowman at Cranfield School of Management in the UK. And this describes the interaction of two people, how typically two people have a conversation. And when two people enter a conversation, there's usually an area called the Zone of Comfortable Debate. They start a conversation at this point where it's nice, comfortable, cozy interaction, but it's almost like those water cooler conversations that's catching up on the news, catching up on the gossip, maybe what they've done with their family, their favourite sports team, what has happened. So it's a nice, easy interaction. But if we're working with somebody and we're coaching somebody, there is usually something more than just this nice social conversation. There is a heart of the matter. In the UK, we have a phrase which is the elephant in the room. So there is this large creature in the room, and sometimes people just skirt around it. They ignore it. They try to pretend it's not there. In your country, you may have a similar phrase. I remember when we went to Germany a few weeks ago, our German friend said that the similar expression for them was to put the dog on the table. So you might have your own phrase for a large, significant issue that we choose to ignore and move around. But if we're going to help somebody achieve their goal and have that sustained change, we've really got to address the elephant in the room, create this change, get to the heart of the matter. And then we've got to move into this zone, which is known as the zone of uncomfortable debate, the ZOOD. This is where tension can start to rise. This is where I might have to provide feedback that is quite challenging. It might be difficult for the person to hear. This might be that I have to encourage somebody to acknowledge reality that might be quite difficult for them. And so I can feel the tension rise as I say these things. And sometimes because that tension gets so uncomfortable, as an individual, I choose to exit back to the zone of comfortable debate. I diffuse the tension. It feels much more comfortable. But the problem is we haven't got to the heart of the matter. We haven't addressed the elephant in the room. So as a coach, it's how do I constructively enter the zone of uncomfortable debate, the ZOOD, hold that tension, and work with that individual to help them unlock, to solve the issue, to address the elephant in the room. And to give you an example of this, some time ago I was coaching in an automotive manufacturing organization, and I was debriefing a series of 360 feedback questionnaires. And for this one individual that I was about to meet, I'd had the questionnaire in advance. And it wasn't a very complimentary questionnaire. It talked about the fact that in the verbatim comments, it mentioned that he had bullied some of his direct reports. He demeaned them. He belittled them in public in meetings. So I thought this was going to be a difficult session. And when the person entered the room, he was a physically very large, intimidating person, and he moved his chair to the opposite side of the table. So he was directly opposite me across the table, quite a confrontational setup. But to my relief, he said that he wasn't proud of the report. He'd seen it in advance as well. He wasn't proud of it. He wanted to make a change. But every intervention, when I talked about specifically what is he going to do, there was denial, there was no action, there was a shrug of the shoulders at one point. And so I had to say, this doesn't make sense. You've stated that you want to change, but there's no action leading towards this. And there was still nothing. And I had to increase the tension by saying, eventually, this is rubbish. It does not make sense. What is going on? And I felt very uncomfortable saying that. So my tension level was very high. I could have exited back to the zone of comfortable debate, let him off the hook. But I chose to stay with this high level of tension. And eventually he sighed, he leant back in his chair, and he said, you're right, I need to change, and this is what I'm going to do. And it was almost like there was this breakthrough. So sometimes as coaches, we have to hold that level of tension with the belief that it's serving the coachee and the sponsoring organization to help create this sustained change.
So I think this raises the question, it raised the question in Ian and my mind, you know, how do we as coaches enter that zone of uncomfortable debate more often, courageously and compassionately on behalf of our clients, whether they be the organizational stakeholders or the individuals themselves. So how do we enter this? How do we shift our coaching to be in that high support, high challenge, loving boot quadrant more often and create the flexibility in our style to move where we need to move at any point in that coaching relationship? And we distilled out of our work what we felt were 5 cornerstones for the skills and behaviors that are part of achieving that outcome. The linear process. These are really 5 cornerstones that we reach for when we think about entering that zone of uncomfortable debate, when we're challenging our clients to face the facts. And the 5 cornerstones that we have are feedback, but particularly challenging feedback, accountability, and this is not just accountability to individual actions, but accountability to the coaching relationship and accountability to the organization's strategy, ethos, and values. Courageous goals. How can we challenge our clients and ourselves to go beyond the rational, linear, incremental world of smart goal setting to the exciting, scary adventures of right brain, courageous goal setting? Tension. Ian's mentioned tension already. How do we use tension as a constructive energy in our coaching relationships? How do we calibrate it dynamically with our clients to ensure that they're doing their best work? And finally, systems thinking. How do we act as guardians of the system as well as optimizing individual outcomes? You know, how do we represent those absent stakeholders that are separated by time and space and bring them into our coaching conversation so that we can raise awareness around the broader implications of individual actions and outcomes. This is our FACS model, which we haven't got time to go into in more detail on this session, but it's certainly a model that we'll be challenging you to work with and to understand better and to practice on our longer session on June 13th.
So as Stephen Covey said, let's start with the end in mind, and all coaching begins with a goal. Without a goal, there's no reason to challenge. And here's an example of a courageous goal that we can all recognize. No matter where we are in the world, we all look at the same moon. And on the 25th of May 1961, John F. Kennedy addressed Congress, and he said, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieve the goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon." Now, this was a truly audacious, courageous goal, because at that time he had no idea how that this goal was going to be achieved. So a truly courageous goal. So when we're working with our coachees, how do we work with them to set goals equivalent of landing a man on the moon? And often goals are quite rational, logical, incremental, and smart. And there seems to be a difference between smart goals and courageous goals. And in 2013, there was a study by Leadership IQ of 4,000 individuals in 400 organizations looking at appraisal processes and goal setting in appraisal processes. And that found that only 15% of people found that the goals helped them achieve great things. So there's a huge disconnect between the processes that we put in place to set goals and the reality of how it's helping people achieve greatness. And so to bridge the gap, we look at courageous goals, and there's 3 steps to achieve a courageous goals. There's the dream about landing the man on the moon, dream about winning an Olympic medal, and then there's sharing it. Share it with somebody who can offer you support, but can also keep you accountable to help you on your track towards achieving that courageous goal. And then start. Start by taking 1 step towards achieving that courageous goal. So dream, share, start is a fantastic way, fantastic simple way of looking at how to achieve a courageous goal.
So we hope that that short session on challenging coaching has whetted your appetite with a desire to learn more about how to work with the FACS coaching model, how to set courageous goals, and how to enter the zone of uncomfortable debate. We said at the beginning that we wanted to challenge you to challenge more, to come to the edge of your coaching skills, and we'd like to leave you with this poem by the French poet Guillaume Apollinaire. Come to the edge.
We can't, we're afraid.
Come to the edge.
We can't, we will fall.
Come to the edge.
And they came, and he pushed them, and they flew.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation, but there is time for those of you who want us to ask a few questions online, then we'll be more than happy to take those from you right now.
Thank you very much, John and Ian. That was an incredible presentation, and I have quite a few questions that have come in. As a reminder, you can continue this conversation both on Facebook and in our LinkedIn group, facebook.com/WBECS. And we have a question here, and that is, how do you best address the bias of some clients and prospects who don't see the value of hiring a coach to improve their leadership and culture to, in turn, improve their bottom line?
So could you just repeat that question again, Sharon?
It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a deep question. How do you best address the bias of some clients and prospects who don't see the value of hiring a coach? And and what is perceived here is the value to improve their leadership or improve their culture or improve their bottom line.
Yeah. John, do you want to go with that? Because you've got a very interesting phrase about triple bottom line.
Yes, yeah, I think, you know, what this question seems to be asking about really justifying the investment in coaching and how do we convince organizational stakeholders that this is a worthwhile investment. And I think a lot of the work that Ian and I have done with challenging coaching has been in response to clients who have asked us that question. So I remember many years ago a client ringing me up before we'd started writing our work and saying, John, you know, all my sales managers have been on a 3-day introduction to coaching course. They've come back. They're building great relationships. We've got high morale, high engagement, but we can't see the impact of this coaching on the bottom line. Can you come in and help us get more out of the coaching? Because we're worried that if we don't do that, our managers will slip back to their previous command and control habits. And I think part of our work on challenging coaching has been to focus on that organizational agenda as well as the individual agenda, to really, in the contracting stage, make sure that we talk to all the stakeholders involved in this assignment and understand what their expectations are, how they're going to measure success, and that we then build that into the coaching contract. And I think when you work with challenging coaching, that whole contracting conversation and phase of coaching needs to go up to another level of sophistication, because we are looking to demonstrate the positive outcomes for the system as a whole. And when those are demonstrated and people have confidence in that, I think they then will invest in coaching, and hopefully we then deliver a win-win solution for the individual and the organization.
Thank you for that. That's a great answer. And I also want to note and thank everybody who's attending, who's been writing in lovely comments as well as questions, saying that this is a great presentation, very affirming and wonderful to both John and Ian. So thank you for your comments, and we appreciate that. The next question that's coming in is, in your systems work, how do you foster awareness of what this means, and what do you introduce to your clients when you're talking about challenging coaching?
Yeah, systems thinking can be a very, very complicated area, but it also can be quite a simple area as well, and it's trying to make it as simple and as accessible to people. And again, this is something that we talk about in the chemistry session, even before we get to contracting. But then when we get to contracting, it's talked about again. But we will talk about the system in which people operate. So it won't be about the individual in isolation. It'll be individual in context within the team organization, short-term and long-term. And it's about raising questions, raising awareness by asking questions. And this could be simple questions that if there was another stakeholder present in the room, what would they ask? And those stakeholders could be employees, teammates, peers, boss. They could be customers, clients, member of the public. So how would it be if your action was reported on the front page of a national newspaper? How would your grandchildren feel about the action that you've taken today when they are 21 in 10 years' time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So you can raise the awareness by looking at a different perspective. And it's about just asking those questions from the point of view of an absent stakeholder for the short term and the long term. And it's not in a judgmental way. It's not to try and push somebody in a particular direction. It's to help them just consider those issues, and then they decide for themselves that point of action. If then you can see longer term consequences that they haven't addressed, then you might offer what happens if. And again, that is just a question to help them raise a different level of awareness from another perspective.
Thank you so much for that answer. That's great. Someone's asking if you can repeat the third item in the setting the courage goals.
So it's dream, share, start. And the start is just what's the first step. So don't think about the long term, how you're going to achieve it. Just think about that one first step that you can take. Dream, share, start.
One of the quotes that we often use in relation to that third step is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. There's no other way to start other than to take the first step. And that's all sometimes that we need to focus on, is the first step, and we let the second and third steps emerge. But the first one is the critical one.
Thank you so much for that. And speaking of steps, if you'd like to continue this conversation in public, you can go to our Facebook group. I put that in the chat area, or in private, you can go to the LinkedIn group. And I'm going to sign off here today and thank John and Ian very much for their presentation. And as I said, we've had many compliments in our question area, people saying, great session, can't wait to get your book and incorporate your concepts. So, and many other great comments as well. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll see everybody on our next session in a few hours. Bye-bye now.